Standing at my daughter Sarah's front door holding her favorite pumpkin pie, I heard my son-in-law Derek's voice booming from inside. "Your father better not expect a seat at my table." My hand froze on the doorbell. Through the window, I watched him demonstrate putting a plate on the floor. "That's where dogs eat, and that's where he belongs if he shows up." Sarah stood silent, head down. After 35 years of building homes for families, I was about to discover I'd lost my own. The doorbell felt heavier than any sledgehammer I'd ever swung during my construction days. But I pressed it anyway. Maybe I'd heard wrong. Maybe Derek was talking about someone else. The cheerful chime echoed inside, followed by footsteps and muffled voices. Derek opened the door wearing that salesman smile of his, the one that never quite reached those calculating gray eyes. Behind him, the house buzzed with conversation and laughter. The smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing drifted out, mixing with the November chill. "19. "Wayne, you made it," Derek announced loudly, stepping aside with an exaggerated gesture. Come in. Sarah's dad is here, everyone." I stepped into the foyer, noticing how he emphasized Sarah's dad, like it was a title that needed explaining. The living room to my right was packed with people I recognized as Derek's family. His parents, Harold and Margaret Hartman, sat in the best chairs like royalty holding court. His brother Marcus, who never let anyone forget he was a judge, stood by the fireplace with a glass of wine. Derek's sister Patricia was there too, her husband Robert commanding attention as he told some story about city politics. "Where's Sarah?" I asked, scanning the room. "Oh, she's in the kitchen, super busy. You know how it is," Derek said already, walking toward the dining room. "Let me show you where you'll be sitting." The dining table was a sight to behold. Crisp white tablecloth, china plates, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier. Every place setting had a small card with elegant calligraphy. I counted 12 chairs, all occupied or claimed. Derek made a show of looking around, touching his chin thoughtfully. Looks like we had a little miscount on the chairs. But hey, no worries, we've got you covered." He strode into the kitchen where Sarah was pulling rolls from the oven. She glanced up, saw me, and immediately looked away. Something was wrong. My daughter, who used to run into my arms every time I visited, wouldn't even meet my eyes. "Sarah prepared something special just for you," Derek announced loud enough for everyone in the next room to hear. He pulled out a plastic plate from under the counter. Not china, like everyone else. A cheap plastic plate, the kind you'd use for a picnic. Then he opened the refrigerator and started scraping leftovers onto it. Dried out Brussels sprouts from what looked like yesterday. Some stringy pieces of turkey that had seen better days. A spoonful of congealed gravy that plopped onto the plate like cement. "There we go." Derek set the plate on the floor in the corner of the kitchen, right next to the trash can. "Sarah told me about your money troubles since you sold your construction company. Times are tough, I get it. This is all we can spare, but at least you won't go hungry, right?" The room had gone quiet. I could feel Derek's family watching from the doorway, could hear someone snicker. Patricia whispered something to her husband, and they both smirked. I looked at Sarah. She was gripping the counter, her knuckles white, still refusing to look at me. "Sarah," I said softly. "You should be grateful," Derek cut in. "Not everyone would make room for unexpected guests on Thanksgiving." Unexpected. I'd been invited 3 weeks ago. Sarah had called me herself, said she was making my favorite sweet potato casserole. I set the pumpkin pie I'd brought on the counter. Sarah's favorite, made from scratch with the recipe her mother had perfected before cancer took her 5 years ago. The pie dish was still warm in my hands, just like the memories it carried. "I understand," I said quietly, though my chest felt like it was caving in. "Thank you for the hospitality." Derek grinned, triumphant. "See, some people just can't take a joke, right, everyone?" But I was already walking toward the door. Behind me, I heard Derek's voice. "Guess the old man's too proud to eat off the floor. More turkey for us. The laughter that followed cut deeper than any insult. Not because of Derek's cruelty, but because Sarah's voice wasn't among those defending me. Outside, the November air hit my face like a wake-up call. As I walked to my truck, I noticed Derek's new BMW M5 parked in the driveway, still sporting temporary tags. $60,000 at least. Yet they couldn't spare a chair or a decent plate for Sarah's father. I climbed into my 15-year-old Ford F-150, the one I'd kept running with my own hands all these years. Through the dining room window, I could see them all sitting down to feast Derek at the head of the table like a king. He was gesturing animatedly, probably retelling the story of my humiliation for those who'd missed the live performance. As I started the engine, I caught a fragment of conversation drifting from the open front door. Marcus was saying something about the rezoning vote next week to Patricia's husband. Then Derek's voice, "Don't worry, it's all locked up. By Christmas we'll be breaking ground." I drove away from my daughter's house with an empty stomach, but a mind suddenly full of questions. The cruelty was shocking enough, but there was something else. Something in Derek's arrogance that felt familiar. I'd seen it before in contractors who thought they were untouchable because they had the right connections. The 20-minute drive to my apartment gave me time to think. Derek owned Hartman Premier Developments, one of the fastest-growing construction companies in the state. In just 2 years, he'd gone from small residential projects to landing major city contracts. Everyone said he was a business genius underbidding established companies by margins that shouldn't have been possible. I'd been in construction for 35 years. I knew what materials cost, what labor cost, what it took to build something that would last. Derek's numbers had never added up, but I'd kept my mouth shut because Sarah seemed happy. The plastic plate on the floor, the public humiliation, the laughter of his family. Any other day, I might have driven home to lick my wounds in private. But something about that BMW, that casual mention of a rezoning vote, that smirk on Derek's face when he thought he'd broken me. I'd built my reputation on 2 things: quality work and honest dealings. I'd raised Sarah to value the same. Watching her stand silent while her husband treated me like a dog wasn't just painful. It was wrong. Everything about this felt wrong. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the hurt was transforming into something else. Not anger, exactly. More like the sensation I used to get on job sites when I'd spot a support beam that wasn't quite right. That instinct that told me to look closer before the whole structure came crashing down. I parked in my usual spot and sat for a moment watching the sun set behind the modest building I now called home. It wasn't much compared to Sarah's house, but I'd bought it outright with honest money. No mortgage, no debt, no dirty dealings. Derek thought he'd humiliated a weak old man today. He thought I'd shuffled away defeated, broken by his little power play. But Derek had made a crucial mistake, the kind that arrogant men always make. He'd underestimated me. I'd spent decades reading blueprints, spotting flaws, building things that would shelter families for generations. I knew how to look beneath the surface, how to find the cracks in the foundation. And something told me that if I looked closely enough at Derek Hartman's empire, I'd find more than just cracks. I'd find rot. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face turned away, heard Derek's laughter, felt the weight of that pie dish in my hands. But it wasn't self-pity keeping me awake. It was that nagging sensation like a splinter working its way deeper under the skin. By 4 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made coffee. Strong and black the way I'd drunk it on construction sites since I was 18. I sat at my small kitchen table and let my mind wander back over the past 2 years since Derek had married Sarah. The wedding had been lavish. Too lavish for a man who'd supposedly just started his construction company. Ice sculptures, a string quartet, 500 guests at the Riverside Country Club. Sarah had worn a dress that cost more than I made in 3 months back then. When I'd gently asked how they were affording it all, Derek had laughed and said, "That's the difference between your generation and mine, Wayne. We understand leveraging opportunities." Leveraging opportunities. The phrase had stuck with me like a bad taste. I walked to my small home office, really just a converted bedroom where I kept files from my construction days. Most people thought I'd sold my company and retired. The truth was more complicated. I'd dissolved it rather than sell to the wrong hands, keeping careful records of every project, every contract, every lesson learned in 35 years of building. The filing cabinet squeaked as I opened it. Third drawer down, I found what I was looking for. The folder marked Hartman Premier Developments. I'd started it the day Derek had approached me about buying my company. Always do your homework, my father had taught me. Always know who you're dealing with. I spread the papers across my desk as dawn light crept through the blinds. Public records newspaper clippings permit applications. On the surface, it told a story of meteoric success. Derek's company had won bid after bid, each one undercutting the competition by 15 to 20%. But I knew materials, I knew labor costs, I knew what it took to meet code requirements and still turn a profit. I grabbed a calculator and started running numbers on his latest project, a community center on the east side. Concrete at least $40,000 below market rate. Steel reinforcement another $30,000 short. Labor costs impossibly low unless he was using undocumented workers or cutting corners on hours. The math was telling me something Derek's silver tongue couldn't explain away. He was either operating at a massive loss or using substandard materials. No legitimate business could sustain these margins. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the city's public records database. Building permits, inspection reports, contractor licenses. Everything was digital, now accessible to anyone who knew where to look. I started with Derek's first project 2 years ago, a strip mall on Conway Street. The permits were all in order. Every inspection passed with flying colors. But the inspector's name caught my eye, Thomas Brennan. I knew Tom. We'd worked together for years before he joined the city. Solid guy, never let anything slide. I searched for more recent inspections by Brennan. Nothing. A quick search of news archives revealed why Tom had retired suddenly 18 months ago, just 6 months after Derek's company started landing big contracts. Family reasons, the article said. But Tom's family all lived here in town. Project by project, I traced a pattern. Original inspectors who were thorough, experienced, careful. Then sudden retirements, transfers, or reassignments. Replaced by names I didn't recognize, inspectors who seemed to find no problems with any Hartman Premier project. My coffee had gone cold. Outside, the sun was fully up, painting the walls gold. But I was deep in the maze now, following threads that led in troubling directions. I found Derek's bid for the new municipal complex. He'd undercut Morrison Construction by $800,000. Morrison was run by Jim Morrison, a third-generation builder who'd mentored me when I was starting out. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found Jim's number. "Wayne, hell, it's been too long." Jim's gravelly voice filled my ear. "How's retirement treating you?" "Can't complain. Jim, I wanted to ask you about that municipal complex bid you lost last year." There was a pause. When Jim spoke again, his voice had changed. "Why are you asking about that?" "Just curious, the numbers seemed off." "Off." Jim laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Wayne, those numbers were impossible. I've been doing this for 40 years. I know what concrete costs, I know what steel costs. Either Hartman found a way to build with fairy dust or what? Or someone's gonna get hurt when those buildings start falling apart. I filed a complaint with the state board. You know what happened? The investigator got reassigned 2 weeks later. Case closed." We talked for a few more minutes, but I could tell Jim was uncomfortable. Before hanging up, he said something that chilled me. "Be careful, Wayne. Hartman's got friends. The kind of friends who don't appreciate questions." I sat back, pieces of a puzzle forming an ugly picture. But it wasn't complete. There had to be more. Derek was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. He'd need help to coordinate something this complex. Help with permits, help with inspections, help with making complaints disappear. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd overheard while leaving Sarah's house. Marcus talking about a rezoning vote. Patricia's husband Robert was on the city council. Marcus was a judge who could handle any legal challenges. It was all in the family. I pulled up the city council's website and started checking voting records. Every major development project approved in the last 2 years had Robert's vote. Every challenge to those projects had somehow ended up in Marcus's courtroom, dismissed on technicalities. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. I found the financial disclosure forms that city contractors had to file. Derek's was a masterpiece of vague language and shell companies, but there buried in the subsection about corporate officers was a detail that made my blood run cold. Sarah Hartman, Chief Financial Officer. My daughter wasn't just married to Derek. She was officially part of his business. I stood up so fast my chair tipped backward. No. Sarah wouldn't knowingly participate in fraud. She was smart, yes. Good with numbers, yes. But she was also honest. I'd raised her to be honest. Unless Derek had drawn her in gradually. Made it seem normal. Convinced her this was how business worked in the big leagues. Sarah had always felt like we'd lived too modestly, that my insistence on doing everything by the book had held us back. What if Derek had played on that frustration? I went back to the financial records, looking at them with new eyes. The shell companies, the complex money transfers, the invoices from subcontractors who seemed to exist only on paper. It was money laundering, plain and simple, and Sarah's signature was on every document. My hands shook as I photographed each page. Whether she was complicit or manipulated, my daughter was in deep trouble. If Derek's empire collapsed, she'd go down with it. Unless someone forced the truth into the light before it was too late. I thought about the families living in homes built with substandard materials, the public buildings full of children and workers trusting that the structures around them were sound, the honest contractors driven out of business by impossible competition. And I thought about Sarah standing silent in that kitchen, unable or unwilling to defend her father. Was she ashamed of me, or was she ashamed of herself? I looked at the evidence spread across my desk. Financial fraud, building code violations, bribery, conspiracy. The kind of charges that destroyed lives, ended careers, sent people to prison for decades. The easy path would be to walk away. Pretend I hadn't seen anything. Try to rebuild my relationship with Sarah and hope Derek's house of cards didn't collapse with her inside it. But I'd never taken the easy path. I'd built my life and my business on doing things right, even when it cost me, especially when it cost me. I reached for my phone again and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Bill Crawford, retired building inspector turned private investigator. If anyone could help me dig deeper without alerting Derek's friends, it was Bill. The phone rang 3 times before his familiar voice answered. Wayne Donovan. Thought you were enjoying retirement. I need your help, Bill. It's about Derek Hartman. There was a long pause. Funny you should mention that name. You free for breakfast? We need to talk, but not on the phone. Name the place. Murphy's Diner on 12th. 1 hour, and Wayne, come alone and watch your back. You're not the first person to start asking questions about Hartman. I hung up and looked around my small office. Somewhere between last night's humiliation and this morning's discoveries, everything had changed. This wasn't just about a spoiled son-in-law's power play anymore. This was about corruption that went to the heart of my city, my profession, and my family. Derek thought he'd broken me with a plastic plate and some leftover scraps. Instead, he'd awakened something that had been dormant since I'd closed my business. The instinct to build things right. the determination to protect people, the courage to stand up to bullies no matter how connected they were. I gathered the most important documents into a folder and headed for the door. Whatever Bill had to tell me, I suspected it would only confirm what I already knew. Derek Hartman wasn't just arrogant and cruel. He was dangerous. And he had my daughter trapped in his web. But if Derek thought an old construction worker couldn't bring down his empire, he was about to learn the same lesson corrupt builders had been learning since ancient times. No matter how impressive it looks, a structure built on lies will always collapse. The only question is who will be standing clear when it falls. Murphy's Diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained counter, same smell of bacon grease, and strong coffee that could wake the dead. It was the kind of place where construction workers grabbed breakfast before dawn, where deals were made with handshakes, where everyone minded their own business. Bill Crawford was already there, tucked into the corner booth with clear sightlines to both entrances. Old habits from his inspector days. He looked up as I approached, and I was struck by how much he'd aged. His hair was white now, face lined with stress that hadn't been there when he'd retired 5 years ago. "Wayne." He stood to shake my hand, his grip still firm. "You look like hell." "Rough night." I slid into the booth across from him. The waitress appeared instantly with coffee filled both our cups without asking. Another Murphy's tradition. Bill waited until she was gone before speaking. "So, Derek Hartman, what's your interest?" "He's my son-in-law." Bill's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Sarah married him when 2 years ago. Yesterday, I stopped, suddenly embarrassed. The humiliation felt petty compared to what I'd discovered since. "Let's just say we had a family disagreement. Started me looking into his business. And you didn't like what you found." The man's underbidding every contract by margins that shouldn't be possible. Either he's taking massive losses or he's using garbage materials and paying off inspectors. Bill pulled out a tablet from his bag, typed in a password. "Wayne, I need to know you can handle what I'm about to show you. This involves Sarah now." My stomach twisted, but I nodded. "Show me." Bill turned the tablet around. The screen showed photographs of construction sites. Even on the small display, I could see the problems. Rebar that was half the required thickness. Concrete with visible air pockets and irregular coloring that suggested too much sand in the mix. Electrical panels with wiring that looked like a fire waiting to happen. "Jesus," I breathed. "These are Derek's projects." "Everyone. I've been documenting them for 6 months." Bill swiped to a new set of images. "This is the Riverside Elementary expansion. See those support beams? They're rated for half the load they're carrying. That's a building full of kids, Wayne." My hands clenched around the coffee mug. "Who hired you to investigate?" "Tom Morrison, Jim's son. After his dad lost 3 straight bids to Hartman, Tom knew something was wrong. He came to me paid out of his own pocket." Bill's face darkened. 2 months into my investigation, Tom had an accident. Fell off a scaffold at one of his job sites. Broke his back. He's in a wheelchair now. "You're saying it wasn't an accident?" "I'm saying the safety rail that failed had been inspected the day before and passed. I'm saying the inspector who passed it left town the next week. I'm saying Tom was about to file a federal complaint about interstate construction fraud." Bill lowered his voice. "And I'm saying you need to be very careful now that you're asking questions." The waitress returned with menus, but neither of us was hungry anymore. We ordered anyway, keeping up appearances. When she left, Bill pulled out a pair of earbuds. "I need you to hear something. Fair warning, it involves Sarah." My mouth went dry, but I took the earbuds. Bill hit play on an audio file. Derek's voice filled my ears, slightly muffled, but clear enough. There was background noise cards, shuffling ice, clinking in glasses. A poker game. "What? The beauty is, it's all legal on paper," Derek was saying. "Every invoice, every receipt, every inspection report. My girl Sarah, she's got a gift for making numbers dance. Found 12 different ways to wash the money through legitimate accounts." Another voice, one I didn't recognize. But what if someone looks too close? Derek laughed. Who's gonna look? My brother's a judge. Patricia's husband controls the city council. We've got building inspectors on payroll from here to Columbus. Hell, the old man who trained half these guys tried to raise a stink. You see him working anymore. What happened to him? Let's just say early retirement comes sudden sometimes. Amazing how a man loses interest in other people's business when his pension's on the line, or his granddaughter starts getting followed to school. The recording cut to a different conversation, same setting from the sound of it. Sarah's old man would have been perfect, Derek was saying. Owned his construction company, outright spotless reputation going back decades. Could have washed millions through that operation. But the stubborn bastard wouldn't sell. So you married his daughter instead? Best investment I ever made. Sarah came with a finance degree and daddy issues. Spent her whole life watching him count pennies and do everything the hard way. Took me 6 months to convince her that everybody cuts corners, that her dad's way was why they never had money. Now she thinks she's a financial genius moving money around for the big players. She know what she's really doing. She knows enough to be useful, not enough to be dangerous. Thinks we're just being creative with tax strategies. By the time she figures out the truth, she'll be in too deep to do anything but play along. I yanked out the earbuds, my hands shaking with rage. Not at Sarah, but at the calculated way Derek had targeted and manipulated her. Used her frustration with our modest lifestyle to turn her into his accomplice. Bill was watching me carefully. There's more, hours of it. Derek likes to brag when he's winning at cards. What about evidence, real evidence, not just drunk talk? I've got plenty. Photos, documents, recorded conversations with workers who were told to use substandard materials or find another job. Former inspectors who were threatened or bribed. But Wayne, he paused, choosing his words. This is bigger than just Derek. I've traced shell companies to politicians' mob connections in Jersey construction firms across 3 states. Derek's just middle management in something huge. Then why hasn't anyone stopped it? Because everyone who tries ends up like Tom Morrison, or like me. Bill rolled up his sleeve, revealing an ugly scar running from wrist to elbow. Got jumped in my own garage 2 months ago. 3 men with masks and baseball bats. The message was clear, back off or next time it's worse. But you didn't back off. No, but I got smarter. Started working with someone who has the reach to handle this. He pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. Agent Carlos Martinez, FBI. He's been building a RICO case for 2 years. Derek's operation is just one piece, but it's a piece that could bring down the whole network. I stared at the card. FBI. This was so far beyond a family squabble now. Martinez wants to move, but he needs someone inside. Someone with credibility in the construction world who can testify about how these schemes work. Someone who can explain to a jury why a 10% difference in rebar thickness matters. Someone... He met my eyes. Someone who might be able to flip Sarah before she goes down with the rest of them. Our food arrived, but I couldn't eat. My mind was racing through implications. Sarah wasn't just married to a corrupt contractor. She was CFO of a company that was part of an interstate criminal enterprise. Every document she'd signed, every creative accounting move she'd made was another link in the chain that could drag her to federal prison. How long before Martinez moves? Depends on what evidence he can gather. Could be months, could be weeks. But Wayne, if Derek gets spooked, if he thinks the walls are closing in... Bill didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I thought about the recording. Derek bragging about threatening someone's granddaughter. The casual mention of forcing early retirements. Tom Morrison in a wheelchair. Bill's scar. I'll do it, I heard myself say. I'll work with Martinez, but I need something in return. Sarah. A deal, immunity if she cooperates. She was manipulated into this. That's Martinez's call, not mine. But I know he'd rather have cooperative witnesses than more defendants. Bill pulled out a flip phone, the prepaid kind you could buy at any gas station. Take this. Martinez's number is programmed in. Don't use your regular phone to contact him. Don't meet him anywhere you might be seen. And for God's sake, don't confront Derek or warn Sarah. Not yet. I pocketed the phone. There's something else. Last night at dinner I heard Marcus mention a rezoning vote next week. Something about wetlands. Bill's face went pale. The Riverside Wetlands Project. 50 acres of protected land. If they get it rezoned for development, Derek mentioned breaking ground by Christmas. That's hundreds of millions in potential profit, and if they're planning to build with the same substandard materials. Bill grabbed his tablet, started typing rapidly. Wayne, this could be what Martinez needs. A crime in progress he can document in real time. Evidence of the whole network working together. Marcus using his position to influence environmental reviews, Robert pushing the vote through council, Derek ready to build. And Sarah handling the money. Yeah, and Sarah handling the money. Bill's voice was gentle. Wayne, you need to prepare yourself. Even with immunity, even if she cooperates, Sarah's life is about to implode. Her marriage, her career, her reputation, everything. I thought about my daughter as a little girl helping me read blueprints at the kitchen table. So proud when she understood how the numbers worked, how everything had to balance perfectly, or the building wouldn't stand. She'll survive, I said quietly. She's stronger than Derek thinks, stronger than she knows. Bill reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Those buildings Derek's putting up, they're disasters waiting to happen. You could be saving lives. We finished our coffee in silence, two old construction men contemplating the ruins of an industry we'd loved. When we parted in the parking lot, Bill shook my hand again. Watch yourself, Wayne. Derek's got eyes everywhere. Act normal. Don't change your routine. Don't give him any reason to suspect you're onto him. I drove home with the burner phone burning a hole in my pocket and Bill's evidence burning in my mind. The sun was high now, a beautiful November day that seemed to mock the darkness I'd uncovered. At my apartment, I stood at the window looking out at the city I'd helped build. Somewhere out there, families were living in homes held together by greed and lies. Children were attending schools with support beams ready to buckle. Public buildings were ticking time bombs of cut corners and criminal neglect. And somewhere out there, my daughter was sitting at a desk moving money for monsters, thinking she was finally living the life she deserved. I picked up the burner phone and dialed the only number in its memory. Agent Martinez. This is Wayne Donovan. Bill Crawford gave me your number. I understand you need someone who knows construction from the inside. Mr. Donovan, Bill speaks highly of you. Are you prepared to discuss Derek Hartman? I'm prepared to do more than discuss him. But first we need to talk about my daughter. I'm listening. As I began to tell Martinez everything I knew, everything I'd found, everything I feared, one thought kept returning. Derek had given me a plastic plate on the floor trying to humiliate me, but he'd actually given me something else. A reason to fight. And unlike Derek's empire built on sand, my resolve was built on bedrock. The same foundation that had carried me through 35 years of honest work. The truth. 3 days after my meeting with Bill, I sat in my apartment staring at the burner phone Agent Martinez had given me. We'd met twice in secure locations, going over everything I knew about construction fraud, teaching me how to document evidence without raising suspicion. Now came the hardest part. You need to give them a chance, Martinez had said. Approach Sarah privately. If she comes forward voluntarily, it's better for everyone. But Wayne, if she warns Derek instead. I knew the risks. But I also knew my daughter. Somewhere beneath Derek's influence was the girl who'd once cried when she accidentally broke a neighbor's window with a softball, who'd saved her allowance for months to pay for it, even though insurance had covered the damage. I called Sarah's cell from my regular phone. It rang 4 times before she answered. Dad. Her voice sounded tired, strained. I wasn't expecting. How are you? I'd like to see you, sweetheart. Just you and me. Coffee like we used to. A pause. I could hear Derek in the background asking who was calling. It's my dad, she told him. Then to me, I don't know if that's a good idea. After what happened at Thanksgiving. Please, Sarah, 1 hour. There are things we need to discuss. Another pause. Derek's voice again, too low to make out words, but the tone dismissive. Okay, Sarah said finally. Tomorrow at 10. The coffee shop on Maple Street. Thank you. Dad, I'm sorry about the other night. It wasn't supposed to go that way. I closed my eyes. I know, sweetheart. I know. The next morning I arrived at the coffee shop 30 minutes early. It was a place we'd gone when Sarah was in college, midway between campus and my office. Neutral ground full of memories from happier times. I chose a corner table and weighted the folder of evidence heavy in my bag. Not everything, just enough to show her the danger she was in. Enough to hope she'd make the right choice. Sarah walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. She'd lost weight since Thanksgiving, her designer clothes hanging loose. Dark circles under her eyes suggested sleep hadn't come easily to her either. Hi, Dad. She sat down carefully like she was afraid the chair might break. Or maybe afraid I might. You look tired. It's been a rough week. The wetlands project has everyone working overtime. I signaled the waitress for 2 coffees. Sarah used to take hers with 3 sugars and enough cream to turn it beige. Today she drank it black. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you know what Derek's really doing with his construction company? Her shoulders stiffened. What do you mean? The materials he's using, the inspections, the money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. I don't know what you're talking about. But her hands were shaking as she lifted her cup. I pulled out a single photograph from my folder. The Riverside Elementary expansion, a clear shot of the substandard support beams. This is from a school project Derek built. Those beams are rated for half the weight they're carrying. There are 800 kids in that building every day. Sarah stared at the photo. That must be a mistake. Derek would never. It's not a mistake. I pulled out another photo, then another. The municipal complex, the Greenway Shopping Center, the senior living facility on 8th Street, all built with materials that don't meet code, all passed by inspectors who were paid to look the other way. Stop. Sarah pushed the photos away. You don't understand how business works now. Everyone cuts corners to stay competitive. Derek explained it to me. It's just how things are done. Is that what he told you when he had you set up shell companies to launder money? When he had you create false invoices for materials that were never delivered? I kept my voice low, gentle. Sarah, I've seen the financial records. Your signature is on everything. The color drained from her face. How did you? That's not important. What's important is that the FBI has seen them too. Sarah's coffee cup clattered against the saucer. The FBI? They've been building a case for 2 years. Not just against Derek, but against everyone involved. Marcus Patricia's husband, the inspectors, the suppliers. I reached across the table, but she pulled her hands back. And the CFO who made the money disappear into untraceable accounts. No. She shook her head violently. No, Derek said it was legal. Creative accounting, he called it. Tax optimization strategies. Did he also tell you about the people who got hurt when they asked too many questions? Tom Morrison in a wheelchair, Bill Crawford attacked in his own garage. I pulled out my phone, showed her a photo Bill had sent me of his scar. This is what happens to people who threaten Derek's operation. Sarah was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about people getting hurt. But you knew about the money. I thought I was being smart. Finally using my degree for something real instead of just barely getting by like. She stopped, but I knew how that sentence ended. Like we did. Like I had made us do. There's a way out, I said quietly. Agent Martinez is willing to make a deal. Immunity in exchange for cooperation. You could help them understand the financial structure, testify about what you know. You could walk away from this. Walk away. Sarah laughed bitterly. From my marriage, my home, my life. And what about Derek? He'd never let me just walk away. Derek's going to prison, Sarah. The only question is whether you go with him. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos scattered between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. You must hate me. No, sweetheart. Never. I reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't pull away. You're my daughter. I love you. That's why I'm here. Derek said you were jealous of our success. Said you couldn't stand that we'd surpassed what you'd built. Is that what you believe? Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know what I believe anymore. Everything he told me, everything I thought I knew. God, Dad, what have I done? Nothing that can't be fixed. But Sarah, you have to decide now. Tonight, Derek's meeting with Marcus and Robert about the wetlands vote. The FBI will be watching. If that vote goes through, if Derek breaks ground on that project with the same substandard materials, more people could get hurt. Yes. Sarah wiped her eyes with a napkin, smearing her mascara. For a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who'd come to me with scraped knees and broken hearts, trusting that Dad could fix anything. I have files, she said quietly. Records Derek doesn't know I kept. Backup drives hidden in my old apartment, the one I kept after we got married. He made me promise to destroy everything after each project was complete, but I guess some part of me always knew something was wrong. My heart leapt, but I kept my voice calm. That's good, Sarah. That's very good. Agent Martinez will want to see those. I can't go back there, to Derek. If he suspects anything. You don't have to. We can go to your apartment right now, get the drives, take them straight to Martinez. He'll put you in protective custody until this is over. Sarah looked around the coffee shop like she was seeing it for the last time. Maybe she was. Her life as Derek Hartman's wife, as the CFO of a criminal enterprise, was ending in this moment. He never loved me, did he? She asked. It was always about getting to you, getting your company. I think maybe he convinced himself he loved you. People like Derek are good at lying, especially to themselves. I was such a fool. No, you were targeted by a manipulator who knew exactly which buttons to push. He used your ambitions against you, your frustrations, your love. I squeezed her hand. But you're not a fool, Sarah. A fool wouldn't have kept those backup drives. Some part of you always knew the truth. She stood abruptly, decision made. Let's go, before I lose my nerve. We left money on the table and walked to our cars. Sarah's hands were steady now, the tears dried. I recognized the look on her face. It was the same determination I'd seen when she was 12, and decided to rebuild her bike from scratch when she was 18, and fought for her scholarship when she was 22, and graduated at the top of her finance program. Derek had thought he was marrying a weak woman he could control. He'd never understood that Sarah's frustration with our modest life came from strength, not weakness. She'd wanted more because she knew she was capable of more. Now she'd have the chance to prove it, not by laundering money for criminals, but by standing up to them. Follow me to the apartment, she said. And Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. Never, I promised. Not ever. As we drove through the city streets, I thought about Derek sitting in his office, confident in his empire of lies. He had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The wetlands vote was tonight. By tomorrow, federal agents would be moving in. All because he'd underestimated two things: a father's love for his daughter and that daughter's courage when faced with the truth. The plastic plate on the floor had been meant to humiliate me. Instead, it had been the first domino to fall. And when you build your empire on a foundation of crime, it doesn't take much to bring it all tumbling down. Sarah's apartment building came into view, a modest place she'd insisted on keeping for sentimental reasons. Now I understood why. It was her escape route, her subconscious preparing for the day she'd need to run. That day was today, and tomorrow Derek would learn what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness, when you confused quiet strength with defeat. Tomorrow the hunter would become the hunted. But today I had my daughter back. Sarah's backup drives contained everything Agent Martinez had dreamed of finding. Financial records, email chains, recorded conversations Derek didn't know she'd saved. We spent 6 hours in a federal building downtown, Sarah walking investigators through each transaction, while I sat beside her, my presence the anchor she needed. By the time we emerged, the sun was setting. The wetlands vote was scheduled for 7 that evening. Martinez had offered to put Sarah in a safe house immediately, but she'd surprised everyone with a request. "I want to go to the council meeting," she'd said. "If I'm going to testify against my husband, I need to see him one last time. I need to see him when he thinks he's won." Martinez had reluctantly agreed, assigning 2 undercover agents to shadow us. As we drove to City Hall, Sarah sat quietly beside me in my truck, staring out the window at the city passing by. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said suddenly. "I actually became good at what I did, moving money, creating financial structures. I could have made a real career out of it legitimately." "You still can, after this is over." "After this is over, who's going to hire Derek Hartman's ex-wife, the woman who helped launder money for the mob? The woman who came forward, the woman who did the right thing when it mattered." I glanced at her. "That takes courage, Sarah. Real courage. The kind that matters." City Hall was packed. The wetlands rezoning had drawn environmental protesters, local business owners, and concerned citizens. Derek was there, of course, sitting in the front row with Marcus and their lawyer. He wore his best suit, the picture of a successful businessman supporting civic progress. Patricia's husband, Robert, was at the council table shuffling papers with practiced importance. He'd already made his position clear in the morning paper, calling the rezoning a vital step toward economic growth and job creation. Sarah and I found seats near the back. Derek hadn't noticed us yet, too busy glad-handing other supporters of the project. I watched him work the room, all charm and confidence. In a few hours, federal agents would be arresting him in his own home. But he didn't know that. Right now, he was king of his small, corrupt world. The meeting was called to order. Robert made a motion to approve the rezoning, seconded immediately by another council member I recognized from Derek's poker game recordings. The fix was obvious to anyone who cared to look. Then the public comment period began. Environmental activists spoke passionately about protecting the wetlands. Local residents worried about flooding and wildlife displacement. A teacher from Riverside Elementary thanked the council for supporting development that would bring tax revenue to the schools. I wondered if she knew her students attended classes under beams that could collapse at any moment. Derek was called to present the development proposal. He strode to the podium like he owned the room, pulling up a slideshow of architectural renderings. Beautiful buildings rising from reclaimed land, promising jobs and prosperity. "Hartman Premier Developments has a proven track record," he said smoothly. "We've completed 18 major projects in the last 2 years, all on time and under budget. We know how to deliver value to this community." Value. I thought of the photographs in Bill's collection. The substandard materials, the dangerous construction, the corners cut to maximize profit. Derek's definition of value was very different from mine. Furthermore, Derek continued, "We're committed to environmental responsibility. We'll work closely with all regulatory agencies to ensure minimal impact on the surrounding ecosystem." "Liar," Sarah whispered beside me. Her hands were clenched in her lap. The presentation went on for 20 minutes. Charts showing economic benefits, testimonials from satisfied clients, promises of union jobs and community investment. It was polished, professional, and completely hollow. When Derek finished, the council opened the floor for questions. A few softball queries from friendly council members easily answered. Robert was preparing to call for a vote when something unexpected happened. Marcus stood up. "If I may," Derek's brother said, his judge's voice carrying easily through the chamber. "I'd like to address some concerns about potential legal challenges to this rezoning." Robert looked annoyed but couldn't refuse a judge's request to speak. "Of course, Your Honor. Please proceed." Marcus walked to the podium, passing Derek with a nod. But something in his expression was different. The usual arrogance was replaced by something else. Fear calculation. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, as someone deeply familiar with environmental law, I must inform this council that approving this rezoning would be a grave error. The room went silent. Derek half rose from his seat, confusion clear on his face. The federal protections on these wetlands are ironclad, Marcus continued. Any development would face immediate injunction. The city would waste millions in legal fees fighting unwinnable battles. Moreover, he paused, seemed to gather himself. I've recently become aware of certain irregularities in the bidding process for this project that could expose the council to serious liability. What are you doing? Derek's voice cut through the shocked silence. He was on his feet now, face flushed with rage. Marcus turned to face his brother. What I should have done 2 years ago. What I should have done before people got hurt. Your Honor, Robert interrupted. This is highly irregular. Perhaps we should table this discussion. No. Marcus's voice was firm. This needs to be said publicly. I've been party to corruption that has endangered this community. I've used my position to dismiss legitimate legal challenges to protect criminals to pervert justice, and I'm prepared to face the consequences of those actions. The room erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Council members shouted for order. Derek was screaming at Marcus, calling him a traitor, threatening him with everything from lawsuits to violence. That's when I noticed the federal agents moving into position at the exits. Martinez appeared at my shoulder. Did you know he was going to do that? I shook my head, as stunned as anyone. Marcus was supposed to be part of the conspiracy. He was, until this morning. Martinez allowed himself a small smile. Apparently, someone delivered a package to his home last night. Photos of buildings his brother built. A structural engineer's report on what would happen when they failed. And a note asking if he could live with the blood of children on his hands. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at Marcus with something like hope in her eyes. Who sent the package? We don't know. But Marcus called my office at 6 this morning, ready to make a deal. Martinez's expression hardened. Unlike your daughter, he doesn't get full immunity, but his cooperation will be noted. The council meeting dissolved into chaos. Robert tried to maintain control, but half the council members were demanding explanations, while the other half were trying to leave before they could be implicated. The vote on the wetlands was forgotten. Derek finally spotted Sarah and me in the crowd. His face went from red to white in seconds. You, he snarled, pushing through the crowd toward us. This is you, isn't it? You poisoned her against me. You destroyed everything because you couldn't stand that I succeeded where you failed. He was 3 feet away when the federal agents intercepted him. Derek Hartman. Agent Martinez said, producing his badge. You're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and violation of federal construction standards. Sarah. Derek struggled against the handcuffs. Tell them it's all a mistake. Sarah stood slowly, meeting her husband's eyes with a steadiness I was proud to see. The only mistake, she said quietly, was believing you when you said my father's way was wrong. He built things that stood the test of time. You built lies that are crumbling already. Derek's face contorted with rage. You think you're safe. You think testifying will protect you. I know people, Sarah. People who don't forget betrayal. That's enough. Martinez nodded to his agents. Get him out of here. As they dragged Derek away, still screaming threats and obscenities, I put my arm around Sarah. She was trembling but standing tall. More arrests were happening throughout the chamber. Robert being read his rights at the council table. 2 other council members. A building inspector who'd tried to run and been tackled by an agent. Patricia was there too, crying as she watched her husband being handcuffed. She caught my eye across the room, and I expected hatred. Instead, she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Later, I'd learned that she'd been the one who sent the package to Marcus. Tired of living in fear, Tired of watching her children's father become someone she didn't recognize, she'd taken the photos from Bill Crawford's investigation and made one last attempt to save her brother-in-law's soul. It had worked barely. The wetlands would remain protected. The buildings Derek had constructed would be inspected by honest engineers and reinforced or condemned as necessary. The families and workers who'd been endangered would be safe. And my daughter would begin the long journey back from the darkness Derek had led her into. As we left City Hall walking past the media circus and the shouting protesters and the federal agents still making arrests, Sarah slipped her hand into mine like she used to when she was young. "I'm scared, Dad," she admitted. "I know, but you're going to be okay." "How can you be sure?" I squeezed her hand gently. "Because you're your mother's daughter, and she was the strongest person I ever knew. That strength is in you, Sarah." Derek tried to corrupt it, but he couldn't destroy it. We reached my truck as the first news vans were arriving, ready to broadcast the biggest corruption scandal in the city's history. Tomorrow, Derek's empire would be front-page news. His victims would finally have justice. His enablers would face consequences. But tonight, I had my daughter back. Derek had thought giving me a plastic plate on the floor would break me. Instead, it had started an avalanche that buried his house of lies. As we drove away from the chaos, Sarah asked, "Where do I go now? I can't go back to the house." "You'll stay with me until we figure things out. It's not much, just a small apartment." "Just..." Sarah almost smiled. "Dad, just an honest home sounds like paradise right now." I thought of Derek in handcuffs heading for a federal holding cell. He'd wanted to show me there was no place for me at his table. Turns out there was no place for corruption in my city. And that was a trade I'd make any day. The arrests made national news. "Massive construction fraud ring busted," screamed the headlines. Cable news ran segments about the danger lurking in buildings across 3 states. Derek's mugshot became the face of contractor corruption, his arrogant smile replaced by the hollow stare of a man watching his world collapse. 3 days after the council meeting, I was making breakfast in my small kitchen when Sarah emerged from the guest bedroom. She'd been staying with me since that night, sleeping fitfully, jumping at every unexpected sound. The FBI had assigned a protection detail after Derek's threats, but fear isn't easily reasoned away. "Coffee?" I asked, already pouring her a cup. "Thanks." She sat at my small table, the same one where I'd first discovered the depth of Derek's corruption. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you." My heart sank. More revelations, more crimes. But Sarah surprised me. "I want to help. Really help. Not just testify, but actively work to fix what Derek broke." "What do you mean?" "The FBI showed me a list yesterday. Families living in dangerous buildings, schools with structural problems, senior centers that could collapse." Her voice strengthened. "I know where every corner was cut, which buildings are most at risk. I want to help make it right." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. We both tensed. The marshals weren't due for another hour. "Mr. Donovan," a woman's voice nervous but determined. "My name is Patricia Hartman. I need to speak with you." Derek's sister. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing alone, holding the hands of 2 young children. No threat here, just a mother who looked as exhausted as we felt. I opened the door. "Patricia, I'm sorry to intrude. I know you have no reason to welcome me, but..." She glanced at her children. "These are my kids, Emma and James. They wanted to meet the man who stopped their uncle from hurting people." The little girl, maybe 6 years old, stepped forward with the fearlessness of childhood. "Are you the one who made sure our school won't fall down?" I knelt to her level. "I helped. A lot of people worked together to keep you safe." "Mommy says Uncle Derek built bad buildings. She says Daddy helped him, but he's sorry now." "Emma, that's enough," Patricia said gently. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I came to thank you, and to ask, could we talk? There are things you should know." I invited them in. Sarah made hot chocolate for the children, while Patricia and I sat in the living room. She looked older than when I'd last seen her, aged by stress and revelation. "I've been living in fear for 2 years," she began. "Robert, my husband, he wasn't always part of this. Derek drew him in slowly, first with campaign contributions, then with threats when he tried to back out. That story about the building inspector's granddaughter being followed, that was our Emma, Derek's own niece. I felt sick. He threatened his own family. Derek didn't see family. He saw assets and liabilities." Patricia pulled out a thick envelope. "I've been keeping records too. Not financial ones like Sarah, but dates, times, conversations. Every threat, every bribe, every person Derek hurt or planned to hurt." "Why didn't you go to the police?" "With what hearsay from the corrupt councilman's wife, besides Derek made it clear what would happen if anyone talked." She touched a faint scar on her neck I hadn't noticed before. "This was his warning when I suggested Robert should reconsider the Simpson Street project." Sarah had joined us, bringing Patricia a cup of tea. "The Simpson Street Senior Center." Patricia nodded. 16 stories of substandard concrete. Derek bragged it would last just long enough for the warranty to expire. "Old people die anyway," he said. "Who's going to sue?" The casual cruelty took my breath away. I'd known Derek was corrupt, but this was beyond mere greed. This was sociopathic. "There's more," Patricia continued. "The night before the council meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those buildings, all those people. So I did something desperate. I sent Marcus those inspection photos." "That was you," Sarah leaned forward. "But why would he listen? He was part of it all." "Because Marcus has a daughter too. 7 years old, attends Riverside Elementary." Patricia's voice cracked. "I included her class photo with the structural report. Told him to look at those faces and imagine the headlines when the roof collapsed. Told him Derek wouldn't protect him when children died, would throw him to the wolves to save himself. And it worked," I said quietly. "Barely. Marcus called me at 3 in the morning crying. He'd driven to the school, stood outside looking at his daughter's classroom, imagining." She wiped her eyes. "He made his choice then. Called the FBI, confessed everything. He's facing 10 years minimum, but at least he can look his daughter in the eye." Emma wandered over, clutching her hot chocolate. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Because sometimes adults make bad choices, sweetie, and it makes us sad. The little girl considered this with the wisdom of children. Then you should make good choices." "You're right." Patricia hugged her daughter. "That's why we're here." Over the next hour, Patricia shared everything she knew. It was worse than we'd imagined. Derek had connections to organized crime families who laundered money through construction projects. Politicians in 4 states were implicated. Building inspectors had been bribed, threatened, or replaced systematically. "He kept recordings," Patricia said finally. "Hidden in his home office. Insurance, he called it, in case anyone turned on him. Every bribe, every threat, every criminal conversation for 2 years." Sarah and I exchanged glances. Those recordings could expand the FBI's case exponentially. "Where?" Sarah asked. "Behind a false panel in his desk. He showed Robert once drunk and bragging about how he owned half the city." Patricia stood to leave. "I've told the FBI, but I wanted you to know too. You deserve to know the full scope of what you've stopped." As she gathered her children to go, Patricia paused at the door. "Mr. Donovan at Thanksgiving, what Derek did. Robert and I should have stopped it. Should have stood up to him. I'm sorry." "You're standing up now," I said. "That's what matters." After they left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a while. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. Somewhere in the city, FBI agents were probably retrieving those recordings, adding more evidence to an already overwhelming case. "She risked everything sending those photos to Marcus," Sarah said finally. "Sometimes one person's courage can start an avalanche." "Like yours did." She looked at me with something approaching her old warmth. "If you hadn't started investigating, hadn't pushed forward despite the danger, I was protecting my daughter. Any parent would do the same. No, Sarah said firmly. Not any parent. Derek's parents knew. Patricia just confirmed it. They knew, and they chose to protect their wealth instead of innocent people. The apartment's intercom buzzed. The marshal arriving for Sarah's daily check-in. Life under protection wasn't easy, but it was temporary. Derek's trial would start in 6 months. After Sarah testified, she could begin rebuilding her life. I've been thinking, Sarah said as we waited for the marshal, about what I want to do after this is over. I can't go back to corporate finance, not after this, but maybe I could use what I know differently. How? Forensic accounting, helping catch people like Derek, or working with nonprofits to ensure their money is clean. She managed a small smile. Turn my skills toward building up instead of tearing down. Your mother would be proud. Would she? Sarah's voice was wistful. I've strayed so far from everything you both taught me. And you found your way back. That takes more strength than never straying at all. The marshal arrived, a stern woman named Deputy Coleman, who'd been assigned to Sarah's case. She brought news 3 more arrests overnight, including Harold Hartman Derek's father. The recordings Patricia had mentioned were everything the FBI had hoped for and more. Derek's looking at 30 to 40 years, Coleman reported. His lawyer is already floating plea deals, but the prosecutor isn't interested. Too many victims, too much damage. Good, I thought, but didn't say. Derek had built his empire on the suffering of others. Let him spend decades contemplating the cost. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived. Bill Crawford, looking healthier than when we'd met at Murphy's Diner. His arm was still scarred, but he walked with renewed purpose. Thought you should know, he said, settling into my worn recliner. The city's formed a task force to inspect every building Derek's company touched. I've been asked to lead it. That's wonderful, Bill. It's a big job. We'll need construction experts, people who can spot problems and recommend fixes. He looked at me meaningfully. People with 35 years of experience who know buildings inside and out. I'm retired. I protested, but my heart wasn't in it. So was I. But some things are too important for retirement. Bill leaned forward. Wayne, there are thousands of families living and working in buildings that might be death traps. We need people who care more about safety than profit. People like you. Sarah spoke up from the kitchen. Do it, Dad. Help them fix what Derek broke. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. When do we start? Monday. Pays government scale, so nothing spectacular, but the work? The work matters. I finished. That's enough. Bill grinned, the years seeming to fall away from his face. Just like old times, eh? You and me making sure buildings don't fall down. Except this time we're fixing someone else's mess. True. But that's what we do, isn't it? We build things right, even when that means tearing down what's wrong first. After Bill left, Sarah and I prepared dinner together. Simple spaghetti with marinara, nothing fancy. But cooking with my daughter talking about ordinary things felt like a luxury after the week we'd had. I got a call today, Sarah mentioned casually. From Morrison Construction. Jim's son, Tom, the one in the wheelchair. He wants to meet with me. He's starting a nonprofit, building affordable housing using ethical contractors. He needs someone who understands financial structures but won't compromise on integrity. She paused. He said breaking his back was worth it if it helped expose Derek. Said he'd rather be in a wheelchair with a clear conscience than walking around building death traps. Sounds like Jim raised him right. Like you raised me, even when I forgot it for a while. We ate in comfortable silence, the TV news playing in the background. The corruption scandal was still the lead story. A reporter was interviewing families who'd discovered their homes had major structural flaws. The fear and betrayal in their faces was hard to watch. We'll make it right, Sarah said quietly. All of us together. We'll make it right. That night, I couldn't sleep. But for the first time in a week, it wasn't from worry. It was from anticipation. Monday, I'd start working with Bill to inspect and document every building Derek had touched. Sarah would begin her journey toward redemption, helping build affordable homes for families who needed them. Patricia and Marcus would face consequences, but also find some measure of peace in their cooperation. And Derek would sit in a federal cell, his empire reduced to rubble, his family scattered, his legacy one of greed and failure. He'd tried to humiliate me with a plastic plate on the floor to show me I had no place at his table. But his table had been built on shifting sand, and now it had collapsed entirely. My table might be small, might be modest, but it was built on bedrock principles that had weathered 35 years in construction, and would weather 35 more. In the guest room, I could hear Sarah on the phone with Agent Martinez going over details for tomorrow's deposition. Her voice was steady, determined. She was her mother's daughter, after all, finding strength in the worst of circumstances. Derek had given me a gift that Thanksgiving night, though he'd never intended it. He'd shown me that everything I'd built, everything I'd taught my daughter, everything I'd stood for, had been worth it. A plastic plate on the floor. Such a small, petty gesture. Such a catastrophic mistake. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Columbus, watching Derek Hartman receive his sentence. 43 years without possibility of parole. The courtroom was packed with victims, journalists, and former associates turning state's evidence. Derek, who'd once strutted through life like an emperor, now shuffled in orange jumpsuit, and shackles his shoulders bent under the weight of his crimes. Sarah sat beside me, no longer the designer-dressed trophy wife, but a woman who'd found her steel through fire. She'd testified for 3 days, calmly detailing financial structures that had laundered millions through paper companies. Her immunity agreement held. She'd walk free, though freedom came with its own costs. Derek Hartman. The judge intoned. You violated the sacred trust between builder and community. You endangered thousands of lives for profit. You corrupted public officials, destroyed honest businesses, and threatened anyone who stood in your way. She paused, eyes cold behind wire-rimmed glasses. Your sentence reflects not just the crimes you committed, but the callous disregard you showed for human life. Derek turned as they led him away, scanning the courtroom, until his eyes found Sarah. For a moment his mask slipped, revealing not the master manipulator but a broken man who'd gambled everything on greed and lost. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then shook his head and let the marshals guide him toward a door he'd never walk back through as a free man. It's over, Sarah whispered. The trial's over, I corrected gently. The work's just beginning. Outside the courthouse, the June sun felt like blessing after months of depositions and testimonies. Bill Crawford waited by his truck, blueprints spread across the hood. In the 6 months since we'd started the inspection task force, we'd examined 217 buildings. 43 required major remediation. 6 had been condemned outright, their residents relocated before tragedy struck. Riverside Elementary's renovation is complete. Bill reported, tapping the blueprints. New support beams, proper materials throughout. Those kids are safer than they've been in years. What's next? The senior center on Simpson. Patricia Hartman's organizing a fundraiser to help cover costs the city can't manage. He grinned. Funny how things turn around. The woman who kept silent about corruption now leading the charge to fix it? Patricia had surprised everyone. After Robert pled guilty and received 8 years, she could have retreated into shame. Instead, she'd liquidated their assets beyond what the government seized, creating a victims fund. She worked 60 hours a week now, coordinating repairs and supporting affected families. Redemption, she'd learned, required more than words. Sarah checked her phone. Tom Morrison's here, ready for lunch. Tom waited at a nearby restaurant, his wheelchair navigated with the same precision he'd once brought to construction sites. The nonprofit he'd founded, Phoenix Housing, had broken ground on its first development last month. 30 units of affordable housing built to standards that exceeded code requirements. Sarah served as CFO, her financial expertise now protecting the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Wayne, Sarah. Tom shook our hands warmly. Great news. We just got approval for the West Side project. 50 more units. Funding, Sarah asked, already thinking numbers. Secured. Mix of federal grants and private donations, including a rather large anonymous gift that came through this morning. Sarah frowned. Anonymous? That makes me nervous after everything? Full documentation provided, Tom assured her. Clean money from someone who wants to remain private. My guess? He smiled. Someone with a guilty conscience trying to balance the scales. Marcuster thought, but didn't say. The former judge was serving 12 years, but had somehow found ways to funnel money from his remaining legal assets to rebuilding efforts. His daughter visited him every week, a reminder of what he'd almost lost and why he'd finally made the right choice. Over lunch, we discussed plans and possibilities. Tom's organization would provide not just housing, but job training for residents, many of whom had been priced out by Derek's gentrification schemes. Sarah had designed financial literacy programs, remembering how Derek had exploited people's ignorance about complex transactions. My father once told me, Tom said, gesturing to his wheelchair, that everything happens for a reason. I hated him for saying that after my accident, but now… He looked at each of us. If I hadn't been investigating Derek, if he hadn't had me pushed off that scaffold, none of this would have happened. His empire would still be standing. People would still be in danger. That's a generous way to look at it, I said. It's the only way that lets me sleep at night, taking something broken and building something better from the pieces. After lunch, Sarah and I drove to the site of Tom's first Phoenix housing project, where Derek's company had planned luxury condos that would have priced out longtime residents' modest but solid homes were rising. Families who'd rented for generations would own these homes, their mortgages structured fairly, their futures secured. Pete Washington, the foreman, waved us over. I'd known Pete for 20 years, one of the honest contractors Derek had driven toward bankruptcy with illegal underbidding. Now he supervised construction with the meticulousness of someone who'd learned the cost of cutting corners. Want to see something beautiful? Pete asked, leading us to a freshly poured foundation. Proper rebar spacing. Concrete mixed to exact specifications. Every bolt and beam rated for twice the load it'll carry. He patted the concrete like a proud parent. This'll stand for generations. How it should be, I agreed. How it always should have been. You know what Derek never understood, building cheap means building twice. These families deserve homes that'll shelter their grandchildren. As we walked the site, Sarah grew quiet. I knew she was thinking of the house she'd shared with Derek, seized by the government, and sold to partially fund restitution. She lived in a small apartment, now starting over at 32, with her reputation in tatters, but her conscience clear. Any regrets? I asked softly. Every day, she admitted. But not about coming forward, about ever believing Derek's lies in the first place, about the people who suffered while I moved their money around. She stopped walking, faced me directly. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything, for choosing him over your values, for that Thanksgiving. You came back, I interrupted. That's all that matters. Is it? Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly make amends for what I helped him do. You're building homes for families who need them. You're ensuring money flows honestly. You're teaching others to avoid the traps that caught you. I squeezed her shoulder. Redemption isn't a destination, sweetheart. It's a direction. You're heading the right way. That evening, I returned to my apartment to find an unexpected gift on my doorstep. A pie dish, ceramic, and well-used with a note. Mr. Donovan, this was my mother's. She always said a good pie could heal any wound. Thank you for healing our city. Emma. Patricia's daughter, now 7, and thriving in a school we'd certified as safe. The pie dish was empty, waiting to be filled like the future we were all building together. I thought of that Thanksgiving night 8 months ago. Derek placing a plastic plate on the floor, his family laughing at my humiliation. Sarah standing silent. It had been the worst moment of my life as a father. It had also been the catalyst for everything that followed. Inside, I found a message on my answering machine from Jim Morrison. "Wayne, you old dog. Heard about the Simpson Center repairs. Beautiful work. Also heard Phoenix Housing needs experienced supervisors for their next project. Might know someone who's not quite ready for retirement. Call me." I smiled already, knowing my answer. At 65, I had more buildings to inspect, more families, to protect more young contractors, to mentor in the right way of doing things. Bill and I would spend our remaining years undoing the damage corruption had caused, one honest beam at a time. Sarah called as I was making dinner. "Dad, I wanted you to know. Tom offered me a partnership in Phoenix Housing. Full partner helping expand to other cities. Cleveland's interested Detroit too. Cities full of abandoned buildings that could become affordable homes." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." "It means traveling, being away for weeks at a time. But I think it's what I'm supposed to do. Take what I learned from Derek's schemes and flip it inside out. Build up instead of tear down." "Your mother would be so proud," I said, meaning every word. "Thanks. Oh, and Dad, I'm making Thanksgiving dinner this year. My apartment's small, but Patricia's coming with the kids. Bill and his wife, Tom, some of the Phoenix Housing families. Think you could make your pumpkin pie?" I looked at Emma's mother's pie dish waiting to be filled with something good. "I'll make two, I promised." As night fell over the city, I stood at my window looking out at lights twinkling in buildings I'd helped verify as safe. Somewhere out there, families slept soundly in homes that wouldn't collapse. Children attended schools with proper support beams. Seniors lived in centers built to shelter, not exploit. And somewhere in a federal prison, Derek Hartman sat in a cell built to very specific standards, contemplating 43 years of consequences for his choices. He'd thought respect came from power, from forcing others to acknowledge your superiority. But real respect came from service, from building things that lasted, from protecting those who trusted you. A plastic plate on the floor. Such a small, petty gesture from a small, petty man. But even the mightiest avalanche can start with a single pebble. As I pulled out my mother's pumpkin pie recipe, worn and stained from decades of use, I thought about legacies. Derek had wanted to build an empire and had constructed only ruin. I'd wanted only to build shelter for families and had helped construct something far greater, a community of people committed to doing things right. This Thanksgiving, I wouldn't sit on the floor. I'd sit at a table surrounded by people who'd learned that integrity wasn't just a word, but a foundation strong enough to build a life upon. And for that, I was truly grateful. Looking back, Derek had given me the greatest gift that night. He'd reminded me that a man's worth isn't measured in wealth or power, but in the lives he lifts up, the structures he builds to last, and the courage he shows when facing hard truths. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had a moment when someone's cruelty became the catalyst for positive change? When being pushed down gave you the strength to stand taller than ever before? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in mine, please consider liking and subscribing to hear more. Share this with someone who needs reminding that integrity isn't weakness, but the strongest foundation of all. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May your own foundations be strong, your buildings true, and your Thanksgiving tables surrounded by those who matter most. Until next time, remember, we're all in this together, building something better from the pieces of what came before.